The rain didn't fall that night, it poured down. In the mansion's inner courtyard, under paper lanterns and the gaze of armed men, the driver was removed without a word. 2 security guards held him by the arms, not with open violence, but with that polite firmness that only exists when orders come from above. She didn't scream, didn't run, didn't beg. The heiress remained motionless, spine straight, face trained to betray nothing. But her fingers trembled when his badge, the black one with the family seal, fell to the wet ground and was carelessly stepped on. "It's for security," someone said. No one explained whose. The driver didn't look back. Couldn't. He knew that if he did, everything would crumble. The silence between them was crueler than any public humiliation. A silence that said goodbye without permission for farewell. Then the mother approached. Dark dress, low voice, absolute control. "Choose," she said. "Blood. Or him." The phrase wasn't a common threat. It was a verdict. And the object that sealed everything was there, gleaming in the rain. A red envelope sealed with the family symbol. Inside, the official dismissal order. Permanent. The heiress felt the world shrink. The entire empire now fit on that piece of paper. They said he asked to leave. They said he accepted money. They said it was his choice. She believed it. Because she needed to believe. The driver crossed the gate without looking back. The rain erased his footsteps. And with them, something she couldn't yet name. But there was a detail that night that no one noticed. Not the mother, not the council, not her. The driver's gaze, in the reflection of the gate's glass, wasn't one of surrender. It was one of promise. And by the end of this story, when everything makes sense, you'll understand why that promise changed the fate of an entire empire. Now I'll show you how it all began. She was born knowing she wasn't just a daughter. She was a successor. From a young age, she learned to walk 2 steps behind the family's men. To listen more than speak, to never show fear. In that house, emotions were weaknesses, and women needed to be flawless to survive. Her surname opened doors and closed throats. The family controlled roots, alliances, contracts that never existed on paper. Elegant dinners hid blood pacts. Charity galas financed silent wars. And she grew up at the center of it all, prepared to lead. But never fully accepted, because she was a woman. And because she thought too much. The driver arrived years later, without announcement, without fanfare, always in black, always silent, always 2 steps behind, but aware of everything. He knew when someone was lying before the sentence even finished, knew when a weapon was hidden, knew when she needed silence, never asked questions, never crossed boundaries. And that was exactly what broke the rules. She trusted him in a way she didn't trust anyone, not because she wanted to, but because the body recognized safety before the mind allowed it. In the car, between appointments and meetings where her name was used as currency, she breathed. There, she wasn't the heiress. She was just a tired woman. But there was something strange from the beginning. A detail too small to raise alarms, and too large to be ignored. The driver knew places that were never in the family's records, recognized faces that should have been unknown, and sometimes when the patriarch's name was mentioned, his jaw would clench for a second longer than normal. She noticed, but didn't ask, because in that world, questions cost dearly. The rule was clear: feelings didn't exist. Bonds were exploitable weaknesses, and anything that could be used against you would be. That rainy night, when they removed him in front of everyone, it wasn't just an employee who left through the gates. It was the last thing that made her feel human in that empire of steel. She accepted the version they gave her. She needed to move forward. Power didn't wait. But then something broke that normalcy. The call came too late to be ignored, and too early to be safe. She was alone in the mansion's office, the city of Seoul glowing below, as if nothing could touch it. Documents scattered, contracts waiting for signatures. the empire about to officially fall into her hands. The phone vibrated once. Hidden number. She answered without saying anything. They lied to you. The voice was female, low, precise. Didn't ask permission. Didn't explain itself. The silence on the other end grew too heavy. About the driver, she continued. He never asked to leave, never accepted money, never abandoned you. Her heart didn't race. It sank. Who are you? She asked, keeping her tone firm, trained since childhood. Someone who owed this to him. And to you. A short pause. Calculated. If you keep pretending you don't know, he dies. The call dropped. The world didn't collapse all at once. It cracked. She remained motionless for long seconds, staring at her own reflection in the glass. The perfect heiress, cold, untouchable, trained not to react. But something had already been broken. The details began to align cruelly. The rush with which they removed him. His look that night, not of betrayal, but of forced farewell. The money that never appeared in the accounts she had checked. Everything made sense now, and that was the most dangerous part. She stood up slowly, walked to the safe embedded in the wall, opened it, removed a folder she hadn't touched in years. Unofficial family secrets. There were erased names, old roots, broken agreements, and one of them appeared again. His name, not as an employee, but as an asset. She felt something she hadn't felt since childhood. Fear, not for herself, but for someone the Empire had decided to use as a warning. It was at that moment she understood. Her ascension wasn't just a ceremony, it was a trap. And if that already seemed intense, what was coming next would leave no room for regret. She closed the folder forcefully, took a deep breath, and made the first decision an heiress was never taught. She would go after the truth, even if it cost blood, and this is where she realized there was no turning back. The mansion seemed the same, the long corridors, the silent walls, but now everything watched. She felt it on her skin. The staff avoided eye contact. The security guards exchanged quick glances when she passed, and his name simply wasn't spoken anymore, as if he had never existed. She started with what she did best, observe without being seen. She called the head of security for a casual conversation. Simple questions, technical, nothing too direct. When exactly did the driver request dismissal? There was a microsecond delay, imperceptible to anyone else. For the family security, miss, he replied. Superior orders. Orders, not a request. That night she didn't sleep. She walked through the restricted wing of the mansion where only dangerous decisions were made. Opened old files, deleted cameras, edited records, dates that didn't match. His name appeared again, always around external threats, always before averted attacks. He wasn't a risk, he was a shield. And then she realized something even worse. Since he left, security alerts had increased. Coincidences didn't exist in that world. The next morning, during a meeting with the clan leaders, she felt the silent blow. You seem distracted, her mother said, without raising her voice. This isn't the time for emotional fragility. Fragility. The word fell like a blade. I'm just making sure nothing gets out of control, she replied firmly. One of the uncles smiled, not in approval, in warning. Some pieces need to be sacrificed to keep the board clean. She understood exactly what he was talking about. Later, in the underground parking lot, something happened. She got into the reserve car, not the official armored one. Alone. The smell was still there. Leather, metal, a subtle trace of the cologne he never changed. She closed her eyes for a second longer than she should have. That's when she heard the door open. He wasn't there. But someone was. Miss, said the male voice, contained. It's not safe for you to move around without an escort. She opened her eyes. The security guard seemed too nervous. Since when do you decide what's safe for me? She asked. He swallowed hard. Since new orders were given, orders to protect her. Or to watch her? When the car pulled away, she saw through the rearview mirror a newly installed camera, pointed directly at her. I thought that was the worst moment. I was wrong. Because that wasn't just control, it was preparation. The confirmation came from the last person she expected. And precisely because of that, it hurt more. It was Hannah, the assistant who had always been too close to be irrelevant and too far to be trustworthy. They met in the old wing of the mansion, where the furniture was older than the lies. Hannah closed the door carefully, looked around, took a deep breath. "I shouldn't be here," she said, or saying this. Silence. "Then why are you?" the heiress asked. Hannah didn't respond immediately. Took something from her jacket's inner pocket. A small flash drive, used. Scratched because what they did to him was a direct order. And because, if they find out, the next piece sacrificed might be you. The heiress didn't extend her hand, give way, but kept her face immobile. "Where is he?" Hannah hesitated. "Officially? Out of the country? Deported? Unofficially?" She paused briefly. "He survived something he wasn't supposed to survive." The flash drive was placed on the table. "This is only half the truth," Hannah said. "The rest is still buried. Open loop. Bigger. Deeper." That night, alone in her room, she watched the recordings. Deleted cameras. Cut conversations. And a scene that shouldn't exist. Him. On his knees. Waited. He never asked to leave, Hannah continued. Never accepted money. On the contrary, he refused. Said he wouldn't abandon you. Said protecting you was part of who he was. The words entered like slow poison. So they changed their approach. Hannah swallowed hard. They said that if he didn't accept, he'd be accused of internal treason. That his body would appear as a warning. He chose to disappear so you could take the throne without blood on your hands. The heiress felt the ground. Bloodied, silent, refusing the money. Refusing the easy way out. Refusing to abandon her. She turned it off before the end. The tears didn't come. Something worse did. Clarity. They hadn't removed a driver. They had tried to erase a man who knew too much, and loved too much. And now I need to tell you what no one told me. She stopped asking for answers, and began to create silence around herself. In the following days, no one noticed the change immediately. It was subtle, calculated, invisible to those who only looked at surfaces. But she began to act differently, stopped delegating small decisions, started attending meetings without interrupting. Took notes, observed, measured each reaction, learned where power truly lived, not in positions, but in fears. She began testing limits, changed routes without warning, canceled commitments at the last minute, summoned people at improbable hours, and noted who trembled. At night, alone, she trained, not in gyms, but in the... It showed choice, his voice low, firm. "If someone needs to disappear, let it be me. But she doesn't touch that blood." She closed her eyes. The weight of that decision wasn't sacrifice, it was silent love. The next morning she dressed in black, not as mourning, as warning. At the council meeting she spoke little, but when she did, everyone listened. Some old alliances will be reviewed, some protections will be reevaluated. The uncle who had smiled before lost his smile. "Are you insinuating something?" he asked. She held his gaze. "I'm warning, her world hadn't changed. She had, but the price of that was higher than I imagined. She didn't plan to look for him." That was the lie she repeated to herself. Because, in truth, every decision she made in recent weeks pointed to the same place. To the same name she never said aloud. Him. The information arrived without emotion, like everything in that world. A brief report, an address, a warning. Don't go alone. She went. The building was outside the family's jurisdiction, neutral territory, or the closest thing to it that still existed. When the elevator opened, the smell of oil and metal filled the air. And then she saw him, taller, stronger, with new scars. But his eyes, the same eyes that always watched her through the rearview mirror. Time froze. Neither of them moved. There were no words ready for that moment. Just everything that had been contained for years. "You shouldn't be here," he finally said. The voice was still calm, but carried something that didn't exist before. Distance. She took a step forward. "Did you lie to me?" He took a deep breath. They lied to you. That phrase hurt more than any accusation. She wanted to touch him, wanted to confirm he was real, but didn't allow herself, because touching meant choosing, and choosing meant war. If someone knows I'm here, she began. They already know, he interrupted. They always know. The silence between them grew heavy. It wasn't immediate desire. It was something more dangerous, recognition. She realized he was no longer just someone who needed to be protected. He had built something of his own, something that no longer depended on her, and that scared her, because for the first time she didn't control the equation. He approached. Didn't touch. I survived because I had to forget you. Don't force me to remember now. The words cut through like a blade, but their bodies didn't obey. The proximity was electric, contained, forbidden on every possible level. This can't happen, but it does. And that's exactly where everything exploded. The sound came before the impact. Metal tearing through the air, a dry crash, glass exploding in slow motion. She didn't have time to react. He pulled her forcefully, his body in front of hers, as he always did, as if the years hadn't passed, as if that was still the only place where he existed between danger and her. Get down. The order came out firm, automatic. The floor was cold, her heart erratic, gunshots. Not many. Precise. This wasn't a warning, it was an execution. She understood immediately. The family didn't come for her. They came to eliminate him, and if necessary, eliminate her, along with him. They know, she whispered, more to herself. He was already in motion, fast, calculated. It wasn't improvisation. It was someone who had been expecting this. You were never safe, he said. You were only protected while you obeyed. They went through a side door, stairs, distant siren, and then the mistake. A familiar face appeared in the corridor. One of the family's men, smiling. The heiress finally left her cage, he said, and chose the wrong company. She felt the weight of choice before even responding. If she backed down now, everything would return to its place. He would die, the empire would remain intact. If she moved forward, nothing would remain as before. The man raised his weapon. She didn't hesitate. Get down, she said to the driver, and pulled the trigger first. The sound echoed, the body fell, silence. Her hand trembled, not from fear, from rupture. That was irreversible. She had just killed someone from her own family. He looked at her differently, not as someone who needed to be saved, but as someone who had chosen. Now there's no going back, he said. She lifted her face. I know. And in that instant she died as an obedient heiress, and was born as something far more dangerous. After that, nothing was ever the same. The news didn't take long to spread, not through the newspapers, but through the right channels. Whispers crossing marble corridors, encrypted messages, gazes that avoided hers. The heiress had crossed the line, and no one knew exactly which side she was on now. She spent the night without sleep, not from regret, but because for the first time silence didn't protect her. He was sitting on the other side of the room, clean, too calm for someone who almost died hours before. They're going to react, he said, not immediately. It'll come in waves. She nodded. She always knew how the family worked. First isolation, then doubt, finally destruction. And she already felt the first blow. Access to accounts was blocked. Old allies began to disappear. Invitations were canceled. She still had the title, but the power was being tested. You should have stayed away from this, she said, without looking at him. He stood up slowly. Don't lie to yourself, he replied. They were always going to use you, and they were always going to kill me. He was right. What hurt wasn't the loss of control. It was realizing she never had it. She walked to the window. The city continued living. Indifferent. If I fall, she said, you'll be the first target. He approached, didn't touch her. If you fall, he replied, they fall with you. She turned her face. In his eyes there was no romantic promise. There was strategy, alliance, and something deeper. Belonging. That morning, she made 3 calls. One to someone who owed favors to the family. Another to someone the family believed was dead. The third to someone who never expected to hear her voice again. Each call cost something: trust, blood, reputation. But when she finished, something had changed. She was no longer reacting. She was positioning herself. He watched in silence. "You've realized, haven't you?" he said. "What?" "They created you to rule." Pause. "But they never imagined you'd choose who to share the throne with." She closed her eyes for a second. "If you've made it this far, you already know. The price of power isn't what you lose. It's what you decide to protect." The empire didn't fall that week or the next. It began to crumble in a crueler way. From within, the family never announced war. Didn't need to. They realized something worse. She was no longer playing their game. At the final ceremony, when she officially took command, she entered alone. Dark dress, upright posture, impassive face, no ancient symbols, no traditional oaths. The elders exchanged glances. That was already an affront. When she reached the podium, she didn't speak about legacy or about blood. She spoke about survival. "The world has changed," she said, "and those who cling to the past become targets." Some understood. Others smiled, thinking they still had control. He watched from afar, not as a driver, not as a subordinate, but as someone who now existed outside the shadows. No one there knew the routes were changing, that the contracts had new intermediaries, that the family's old allies now answered to two names: hers and his. That night she didn't return to the main mansion. She chose a smaller place, discreet, safe. When she closed the door, the silence was different. It wasn't empty. She took off her shoes, leaned against the wall. "They're going to try to destroy me," she said. He approached. "I know, you could leave now." He smiled slightly. "I left once before. Won't do it again." She looked at him. There was no fairy tale promise there, no redemption. There was choice and shared power. "If we stay together," she began. "We stand against the world," he completed. She nodded. Outside, soul glowed. Inside, something had been redefined. She was no longer just the mafia heiress. She was the woman who chose, and that was far more frightening than any weapon. But there was something she still didn't know. One last piece off the board. A message waited. On his phone, no sender. Just one sentence: "They know." And below, a name that should have been dead for years. She slowly lifted her gaze. "What is it?" He hesitated for the first time. "It seems," pause, "that the next war won't be against your family. If this story gripped you, comment. Who would you protect if you had to choose between power and love? Texto Padro."